Okay, so table saw safety. I'm not a professional. I don't have any authority to talk about this, but I've used the table saw a few times. I've made mistakes, and I've seen other people make mistakes, and seen good practices, and have had some good lessons about it myself. So here we go. Your table saw usually is not in a yard outside. It's usually maybe in your shop or your garage, which is a great place for a table saw. The first things first with the table saw, don't do any work with the blade as far as adjustments or replacing the blade with the power connected. All right, so using a table saw. There's some, before you actually use the table saw, there's some good things to think about. Maybe making sure that there's nothing in the way on top of the table saw, making sure that your blade is level or squared up with the things that you're working on. Maybe even just things like your shoes, so you have a good grip and you won't slip. Maybe if you're working in the yard, maybe cleats or boots are with some good tread are a good thing to have. But if you're in a traditional shop, maybe on a concrete floor, it's good to have some grippy soled non-slip boots. Birkenstocks are usually, though, comfortable and good for most of life. Maybe working with machines is not the thing to use Birkenstocks for. Your table, it's good to have a table that is smooth. It doesn't give extra resistance. Maybe even a wax table free of rust is a good way to do that. Sometimes elements get in the way of that. So before we get too involved on that, let's talk about some parts of a table saw. So a table saw, though you can't normally see it, usually the emergency shut off or on off button is down and below in a place where you can even hit it with your knee, perhaps. If your hands are busy, you can even just turn that thing on and off. Just like that. We'll talk about, we have a blade, and of course the rotation is towards you, which is a key thing to talk about with pieces of wood that might get stuck in between the blade, and if they're not being held securely, could fly out. That's why you would never want to stand directly behind the saw. Also why you want to use a pusher, and actually not just once the material is done being cut, releasing it, you want to make sure that material is clear of the saw. Okay, and you know what, if you have to toss it, that's fine. So talking about material, some material you might want to not cut. If there's any kinds of staples or nails, screws, things like that, nope, we don't want any of that either. Other things, maybe your material might be warped. That causes difficulty in rocking and could make it more likely to pinch between your fence and your blade. So we don't want that either. I mean, some things are just not meant to be cut on a table saw. Some boards might be a more exaggerated warp. We also don't want that. It's always good to have a pusher. There are many different shapes and sizes and designs. When your pusher gets worn out and there's not much pushing, it's time to get a new pusher. All right, so here we are. We're going to talk about actually cutting a piece. We're going to actually cut something just to see how a typical piece will be cut. Also, before I forget, there is these channels here, and those can get stuff stuck in them, which could also get in the way of whatever material you're pushing through. I don't have a miter gauge right now. I don't know where it is, but a miter gauge is something that you would use to push material through a saw, and you could choose different angles to have that wood cut. When you do that, you want to make sure your fence is out of the way, and you cannot, unless there's a specialized situation where you have a fence that ends before the blade, you can't use a miter and a fence at the same time, because it'll cause pinching and you may throw your stock. Also, the minimal distance between the gaps on either side of your blade is good because less chance for material to get stuck in there, causing it to get either sucked in and thrown out, or just pushed, wedged and pinched and pushed back. Most table saws will come with a splitter, a piece that goes behind the blade to keep the wood from getting squeezing together and squeezing around the blade. So and also, if you have a nice guard that will clear your fence and whatever project you're working on, that's the way to go. Always use your guard if you can. They usually now, modern guards will have dogs to keep your material from flying back and getting you. So let's talk about stance. So we already talked quickly about standing behind the material. You don't want to do that because you might end up with some kickback. I prefer to stand over on the side of the cutoff, so my knee can hit it if I need to. Also, because the fence is typically on this side of the blade, on the right side of the blade, that allows whatever material I'm pushing, I'm just naturally pushing against the fence. Okay. Also, we don't want to bring our hands ever across over the saw. You know, this, you might think, oh well, he's going to have to put his arm over the saw. Actually, you don't. You can keep your arm over the saw. Keep yourself balanced, nice, good, squared fighting stance, right? Maybe not boxing or anything like that, but we want to be stable. So also, when you're going to cut something, there's no reason to have a blade sticking way up above stuff. All right. We don't want any loose jewelry, long hair that might get caught in the blade. So we'll remove long-sleeved clothing, and we'll also have glasses on because small sawdust and particles can blow up and hit you. So we want to protrude from the wood just a little bit. It doesn't need to be a whole lot. And we'll adjust our fence. Often fences will need to be measured again. Make sure that you actually are accurate with your measurements on the fences. This one's actually really good. And another thing that can happen with fences is they could be adjusted so that it goes in and gets narrower. That is not a good thing. Being exactly parallel with the blade is the way to be. Sometimes fences will be adjusted out, and that's not a safety issue as if it causes a pinch point by leaning towards the blade. So here we go. We're going to turn this on, and we're going to cut a piece of wood. It's at full speed now, so it's less likely to get stuck. It should cut better. All right. I'm pushing against the fence. It's hard to tell, but even with my push stick, I'm pushing against the fence. All right, just some basic parts and names. So we have this is a table saw. This is the table. This is the blade, the saw blade. The fence. This here's the fence. And that's pretty much all that we really need to talk about. I'm sorry. It could. All right, we're gonna have to start over. A new pusher. All right, got it.